council meeting to order, Thursday, July 13th, 2023. All right, we'll do that one more time. We'd like to call our city council meeting for Thursday, July 13th, 2023 to order. And with that, I'd like to ask my friend Reverend David Harper if he would come up to the podium and do the invocation for us.
Thank you to my fellow Lion and Lions Club. It's good to be here today with you all. Reading from 1 Kings chapter 4, and God gave Solomon wisdom exceeding deep insight and understanding beyond measure, like the sand of the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than that of the men of the East, greater than the wisdom of Egypt. Wouldn't you like to have a dose of that? I admire you all and appreciate you all very much, those of you who govern and govern well. I know it's a difficult job at times. Reading from Proverbs chapter 16, verse 18, passage says, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before the fall." It's a good word, isn't it? Heavenly Father, grant to these your servants a heart of real wisdom as they give of their time and skills in leading our fair city. Grant them courage, especially when tough decisions need to be made. Most of all, keep them from that deadliest of sins, namely pride, for it surely does eventually end in destruction. And may we all claim the promise of St. James that if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men generously, and it will be given to you. And let that be your prayer today as well, that God will grant you the wisdom not only in this meeting, but in the days ahead as well as we proceed in this endeavor of giving order to our fair city. Father in heaven, thank you again for these who are here today, and I ask your blessings upon this meeting, not only today, but in the days ahead. I pray that you will grant your servants wisdom, and you indeed have promised that if we will ask, that you will give it to us, and I claim that promise for them today. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen.
The Reverend David Harper. Okay, now we got Bill Duvall's going to lead us in the pledge.
Thank you. I'd like to take one moment to introduce that we have a scout with us tonight. His name is Xavier Torres. He's visiting. He's in a scout uniform. He's from Troop 535 here in Loganville, and he's a Tenderfoot Scout. So Mr. Torres went to summer camp his first year and is working on the Communication Merit Badge, which is required for Eagle. And we're happy to have him with us, and we're happy to have us join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So everybody will turn to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Thanks, everyone. It is great to see all you folks here tonight. I hope you leave here pleased. And with that, we'll move now to the presentation of our recent audit. And Ken Neal, he's in a hurry to get back home?
Oh, I'm not in that hurry.
Mine is. Okay, hold on 1 minute, Ken.
Okay.
You're right. Ann is right. We need to adopt the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions?
I have some additions, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 things under new please. Lord, sorry about that. I have 3 things I'd like to add under me, please. The first one is a Condrey and Associates contract. The second thing is a budget amendment. And the third thing is a 2024 pension payment, please.
And then I'm going to move my presentation from Chief Lowry to the end after city attorney updates and reports.
Everybody must have heard how long-winded the chief is. He's really not. I encourage everybody to stay, because I tell you, it's going to be something very, very interesting. Okay. With that addition, can we have a motion to adopt the amended agenda? Okay, we got a motion. We have a second?
Second.
Okay, we got 2 seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the agenda is adopted. And now we'll go back to Mr. Ken Neal, here with our audit presentation. Thank you for your patience, Ken.
It's going to be worth the wait. I appreciate your time this evening. We have completed the annual audit for the City of Loganville for the year ended June 30th, 2022. I think I've provided a copy of the report to each member of council. What I'll do this evening is just hit a few of the financial highlights related to the financial statements and a few items, other items pertaining to the audit itself. Going to always point out that you've got this nice financial report. There's only two parts of it that belong to the CPAs, and that's the letter in the front and the letter in the back. Everything else is a representation of management, and our job is to perform our procedures to form an opinion on the fair presentation of the financial information that's contained herein. And we issue that report on pages 1 and 2 of the annual report, which is our independent auditor's report. I'm pleased to say as in years past, for 2022, we are issuing what we refer to as an unmodified opinion, which in audit world, that's as high as you can get. That's what you strive for when you go into it, and we were once again able to issue that report. The next section of the financial statements is a section called the Management's Discussion and Analysis. And what that section of the report is really is it's more of a narrative of the activities that have gone on during the fiscal year that's covered in this report. Talks about some of the highlights, maybe any things that were unusual related to the year are pointed out in that section of the report. I'm not going to read it to you. I'm just referring you to it and suggest at a quiet moment when you have nothing else to do but want to think about the City of Loganville, it's a good thing to peruse because there's good informative information in that. I'm going to slide over to what we call the government-wide financial statements, which begin on page 11 and run through page 13. And in the government-wide, is just as the name implies, it takes all of the activities of the city and all the funds and are sort of rolled together into one section of the financial statements. And as of June of 2022, the city of Loganville had total assets of just over $93 million. During that same period of time, they had liabilities, the city had liabilities of a little over $29 million and a net position, which, if you want to think about that as equity, assets versus minus the liabilities of $64,679,000, which basically represents about a 70% equity position for the city. Now, if you want to boil that down a little bit more and just look at it from a unrestricted, the portion of that net position which is unrestricted, you had $23,470,000 at the end of the year, and that in and of itself is about a 25% equity and unrestricted net position at the end of the year. So whichever way you want to look at it, it depicts a strong financial foundation for the city. Over on page 14, we always like to spend a little bit of time looking at the general fund because so much of the city's operations run through the general fund. At the end of June last year, the city had the general fund had assets of just under $14.7 million. And from that, there was a fund balance at the end of the year of $14,049,000. And of that $14 million, just under $13 million was unassigned, which are basically funds that are available to be spent. You say, well, how much? What's a good number for an unassigned fund balance going forward? GFOA sets a guideline just as a baseline between 3 and 6 months as a foundation of how much you should have in your fund balance. The city in their unassigned at the end of June had just over almost 13 months worth of fund balance in there. So again, another measurement of the strong financial position of the city for at the end of the year. During the year, the general fund increased a little over $2.5 million. Revenues exceeded expenses for the general fund by $2.5 million. I would then refer you to pages, beginning on page 20, where we look at the business-type activities for the city. And when I talk about business type, I'm talking about the water sewer fund and the sanitation funds. These are services that are provided, that fees are charged. At the end of June of last year, the business-type activities had assets totaling just under $53.9 million. And when we look at the equity position for those proprietary funds, at the end of the year, they had a net position of just under $31.9 million. Again, another indication of the strong financial position. Those proprietary funds increased their net position of, let's see how much, it was over $1.7 million for the year, and that was after transferring $300,000 out of the proprietary funds over to the general fund and stuff. Still had a net increase of $1.7 million. As you go back through the report, of course, I would refer you to the notes to the financial statements. There is a lot of information in there. In the notes, you'll find a lot of the underlying assumptions and approaches that the city uses to produce their financial statements, and it's an integral part of this particular report. Again, I'm not going to read that to you. I'm just sort of referring to you and letting you know that it's there. The last thing I really want to talk about is if you go to the very back of the report, the last letter, which is on page 61. And this is where we have our report. It's a long title. You can tell that it's some lawyer somewhere had come up with this, but it's the Independent Auditor's Report on Internal Control over Financial Reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of the financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards. That's a mouthful. This is where, if we had identified during our audit process any material weaknesses in internal control or significant deficiencies in controls over the financial reporting or over compliance with the contracts and agreements that the city has to comply with, this is where we would report those items at. I'm glad to say that for this year, we have no items like that to report. This is what we would call a clean report as far as this yellow, what we refer to as yellow book letter. So we're real pleased with that. So overall, I say it was a very good. We were given a very good set of financial statements to audit to start with, and that's a big step. We made very few changes to the information that was suggested. Very few changes to the information that was given to us, and I think that speaks well for the finance department and the work they do, because there's a lot of transactions that go through there on an annual basis, and and I think they did a really good job of getting that stuff put together, and we appreciate that. So at this point in time, I've used my allotted 6 or 7 minutes here. I'll be quiet if anybody has any specific questions that they'd like to ask.
Do we have an electronic copy of this? Can we get one? Do we have one? Okay.
It's a lot easier to read the book than it is the phone. It's a lot easier to read the book than it is the phone.
It sure is.
But we also ought to take a moment to thank the finance team here and Danny Roberts for managing this city. I got to tell you, I've done P&Ls and profit and loss statements and balance sheets for 40 years, and nothing's like what government does. Is that a fair statement?
That is
Ken?
true.
I think that's probably a pretty fair statement. It's a little different animal.
I know we hired a CPA years ago, and it took him about a year to get up to speed on some of the things that the government does versus private business. So we thank everybody for your efforts.
Well, and I would like to add on to that, since I do this as a business as well. I don't know that y'all have ever had a finding except for a date on a journal entry. I mean, it's so insignificant what the finance department, and what I mean by that is, like, if you've ever written a check for an invoice in your house, like pay the power bill, if you date it wrong and she gets it in the system wrong with the wrong date by accident, that requires an amendment and a journal entry and a finding. It can be a finding if it crosses a year. So the meticulousness that the finance department operates in with Natalie and Susan and Jada is really remarkable. So, I mean, well done. You guys really killed it. Again, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Any questions for Ken?
I appreciate the
Well, can
time.
I ask you the question I asked you earlier?
Sure.
If you look through the paperwork, and I looked through it the other night, going through it on the phone, there's a $4 million decrease in pension liability. And I asked Ken earlier, what does that? And if you would, just explain it, because I don't think I
It's-
could explain it even now.
Well, when you get down in the bushes and start looking at how those numbers are calculated, you get the actuaries that, I guess they're up in the high rises in Atlanta or elsewhere, but in the calculation process, there are several assumptions that have to be made in assuming basically a net pension liability is that how much are we going to have to pay out in the future, and what is that dollar value worth right now in today's dollars? And if anybody has gone into or done any financing or anything over the last year or so, you understand what's happened to interest rates. When interest rates increase, and discount rates increase also. And what it is those that net pension liability is discounted based on current rates. So when you see increasing in interest rates, it's actually going to drive that net pension liability down, because when they're looking out and say payout of this much 20 years down the road, they start discounting it back based on that interest rate down to the current. It reduces that liability. That's about as simple as I can put it. The other big thing that affects that number is the performance of your portfolio, your investments. So those are probably the two biggest factors in determining what that net pension liability is. And I think if I remember right, your return on investment was over $4 million. For the fiscal year also. So that also had an impact on reducing that liability.
And then you shared with me at the last sentence you told me was it can go the other way pretty quick as well.
Oh, it does. It does. It's one of the things, it's hard for the layman to understand how that works. And I have more trouble getting folks to understand because they don't understand. That flows back through your pension expense. And this goes up, that goes down, and so forth, and it's not something you write a check for today, so they don't really understand it. So it is a complicated thing, and I can't say that I completely understand it, but I grasp the concepts and stuff that they do.
You're way ahead of some of us, like me.
Well, and the other thing, too, I think you have some news that this might be the last audit you do with us.
I'm about to hang up the.
No, I thought you were going to sit down. I didn't want you to not.
No, it's going to. This is going to be my last one. I've been working. I did the. Let's see. My first one with the city was, I think, 2006. So I got a few years in, but. My wife says she's got a lot of other things for me to do. So I'm getting out of the audit business, let's put it that way. But I do appreciate that the trust that the city has put in me for these years. The person at the firm who I've got, who I'd like to pick this up and run with it, I worked for 20 years. He does an awful lot of work in local governments, counties, cities, and regional commissions, and a bunch of other authorities. So he's ready to take it on, and he'll do a great job for the city as long as y'all decide to go that direction. But I do appreciate the time that you've given me over these years.
I'm sure the audience would like for you to tell them, what does it feel like to retire at 40?
Yeah. They can take a look at this head, and they know that that's not true. Maybe after 40 years, but no, not quite. I wish.
We appreciate you, Ken. Thank you.
Thank you.
for all the years.
Okay, for those of you that have an agenda with you, you'll notice the consent agendas are things on Monday night that we agreed upon, and we put that in a consent agenda to save time. If all the council members agreed to it, and we need a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Consent agenda is adopted. And we'll move now into the Planning and Development Committee report, and that's going to be Linda Dodd. It is so nice to see Linda here. She is having a medical situation at her home that is quite trying, and I think it'll be good for you just to get out a little while.
It was. It is.
Okay, the floor is yours, dear.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I want us to vote on the case number R23-006, filed an application to rezone 1.417 acres located at 207 Walton Street, map parcel number LG060156, Walton County, Georgia. The current zoning is R16. The request zoning was RM6 for the development of the residential apartments. My understanding that we didn't have anybody show up Monday night, so therefore I make a motion that we decline this.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It is passed. It is declined.
And I just have one thing to say personally. For those of you that do know or don't know about my husband, he went in the hospital on June 2nd. He was sent home on June 14th on hospice. They didn't expect him to live. However, God has different plans for his life, and because of all the prayers and everybody just loving on him, he got a good report from the doctor yesterday. His kidneys are coming back. He still is not out of the woods, but he is doing much better than he was. And I just covet your prayers, continue to pray for him and for me. He's got his days and nights mixed up, so it's been a lot of fun. Staying up at night and staying up during daytime too. But I just want to thank everybody that have sent well wishes to me and thanked, telling me to pray for my husband and my family. And I just really appreciate that. It means a lot, because without God and without prayers, we couldn't make it. And I just want to say thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Linda. Just out of curiosity, just a question in my mind. How many of us have ever lived in an apartment? Okay. Many of us. Gosh darn, I don't know back in the day what I would have done, but just interested. Okay, we'll move along. And to Finance and Human Resource Committee, Ann Hunsinger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It doesn't reflect on what you can see on the screen, but I did add 3 items to the agenda this afternoon. The first one is to make a motion to talk about the Condrey Associates contract. Condrey Associates is the firm that Christy Ash looked at to hire that will perform a comprehensive pay study for the city of Loganville, and that is a study that will help us better assess salary levels based on position and years of tenure. I know that we weren't really sure what that would cost, but the cost has come back at $39,500. So if there are no questions, I'd like to make a motion to hire them, Condrey & Associates, to perform a comprehensive pay study for the city of Loganville at a cost of $39,500.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, that's passed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second thing I added was a budget amendment. I know we just had the budgets, but we needed to amend it. We're going to, I'd like to make a motion to move $315,000 to address the serious disparity in pay that our employees have now and increase the starting pay to become more competitive. What we're dealing with now is that our starting pay is so low that it's lower than the other municipalities and lower than fast food, and we are not able to get people in. Any questions on that? No. Unless you want to. Danny, what's the number that it takes starting to, please? Is it 35? Starting pay?
Sorry, what's the question?
Our new starting pay now will be,
For which department?
give me one.
Starting pay for general labor, I believe, is right at 34. I don't have the exact number, around 34, 35.
Okay.
And then police and fire a little bit different than
Okay.
everyone else.
And per hour, that 34 is about 17.
Yeah, it's close.
It was roughly, starting pay was 32,512, and I believe it went up, I want to say 3,000, somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000.
Private sector, that's what I was getting at.
I think it was more like 3. I think it was around 35.
Right.
Like everybody else, we're finding that we are not paying enough to attract the candidates that we want to work for us.
Right.
And that's something we're trying to do to fix it.
Which is the point of the first item, which was the study. So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion to approve $315,000 in the budget to address the serious pay disparity and increase the starting pay to become more competitive.
Okay?
Second.
Is that a motion?
I made a motion. He made a
Okay.
second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
And the last thing, Mr. Mayor, and Ken alluded to this about our pension fund, what we'd like to do is, I'd like to move money from the general fund and the water fund towards the 2024 pension, 500,000 from the general fund and 250 from the water fund, which turns those into restricted funds. Pretty cut and dry. Any questions on that? I'd like to, well, I'll make the motion, but a motion to approve moving 500,000 from the general fund and 250,000 from the water fund towards the 2024 pension payment. That's actually technically a motion.
Okay. We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Did you aye?
I eyed.
You ayed.
So moved.
Great. Mr. Mayor, that's the end of my business. Thank you so much.
That's it. We move right along then. We move now to Public Safety Committee report. Mr. Jay Boland.
Thank you, sir. Chief Lowry's going to give a presentation at the end of tonight's meeting. Otherwise, everything else was on consent.
Okay. We good?
Yep.
Okay. We'll move to Public Utilities Transportation Committee. Bill Duvall.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no actionable items tonight, but I have a few informational items. So just to talk about, the first thing is, you all may have noticed, we had paving on Leebird Road and Old Zion Road. You also can reflect back through our city, through the help of Georgia DOT, we had some paving along 81 from all the way from here outside of our city through to Bethlehem. So I just wanted to kind of touch on a few things. Just the GDOT program itself, project, which we are thankful for, that it helped our streets, was a contract that was awarded in March of 2022. From there, once they were given notice to proceed, Baldwin Paving, they started around October, and with a closeout of working through at the end of April. I would say they're about done. You can still see barrels out there and a little bit of traffic interruption, but that was a 12-mile project costing about $7 million, which is about $583,000 per mile. So just to share what we've done in Loganville, we used our LMIG and funds to pave. We've got 57 miles. It's kind of difficult to pave all of them. So we spent a contract that we awarded in March. What bids came in on after our work session in March, and then by Thursday, March 8th, we awarded a contract for $296,000, somewhere around there, to Garrett Paving. They were actually given notice to proceed in June, which was nice. They had a total of 1.4 miles. That's what 1.4 miles gets for you in paving, is it's $300,000. So they proceeded to work at the end of June, June 26th, and they ended July 5th. So, they got out there and did the job, and they also did, as opposed to a $583,000 per mile, they did it for a total cost of about $211,000 per mile. May not look as pretty as 81, but I think they did a good job. You might have noticed that there's some skips in there where they didn't do all the pavements. That's because our road department, Cletus, and the people in the road department are going out and rating sections and trying to extend that money so that we're paving the right location. So just want to touch on that and hit on that. I'm real thankful that we've got that out of our way. There was a picture that popped up there, too, at the beginning, that just wanted to touch on. That these were some of, things happen at the wrong time, right? I don't think there's ever a good time to have a water main break, but back on, I think it was a Friday, June 16th, we had a water main break on 81 out there. Just want to recognize the water department and the people that get out there and they work all night to keep our water flowing. And anyway, wanted to just touch on that. And not touch on it, Brandon, in water, I want to really appreciate the work that you all do. I wanted to give a quick update on Destination Part 2. We've worked on, we broke that project up. We've got utilities working its way down there. We had to give them an extension in time. They're a little bit behind. We've had, if you don't know it, we've had a little bit of rain this past spring. But, the sidewalks are in, the utilities are installed, and I believe they're working on restrooms as we speak pretty much. So looking forward to getting that phase done and having restrooms for our toddlers and kids when we go out there. That's a good thing, Danny. And then one other thing to touch on too, we've had some questions about the lights along Old Zion Cemetery, and so just want to mention that we had installed three lights out there. It's real important. You've got kids walking from the stadium down in the mornings before it's daylight, crossing over and going up, and we put some lights there back several months ago. When we've come back, we've got another one ordered. So we're gonna cut some trees and try to open it up a little bit, and we'll get that done and get out there in the middle of the night and see how that's improved things. So we'll keep working on that. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I have no further items.
So, real quick, if I could just.
Absolutely.
Public service announcement. So this was called into Walton County, this water leak, because while we were here, a gentleman came up and told us how great we were, because we took us a couple of days to get to it, but the call didn't come to us. It came to Walton County Water. We didn't get the information passed on to us until I believe the system let us know that our tower was getting low, so that means a break. So if the public sees a water break, call 911, call the after hours number. Don't email, because on Friday night at 9 p.m., the water guys are not looking at their email. So if you see a water main break, call. Sometimes they even call council. Just call 911 and tell them so we can get there quicker. But this was a wonderful Friday night that we stayed there till about 3 a.m. So we got to spend our night there. Had fun. But thanks to the guys, Brandon and Joe, they're back there. Cletus helps. It's a team effort. So anyway, that's how long it takes to fix it. This is a water main. This is an 8-inch water main break. Usually it's sewer too, so, and sewer's so much funner than water. So it smells better, it's cleaner, it's everything, it's just a fun job. But these guys, they just commend them. They jump in and just work as fast as they can to get water restored. But, we do they get blessed out from the citizens about why it broke. Well, I promise y'all, we don't make them break. They just, with friction, and these pipes move constantly with the water going through them, and they do crack. So we don't do it intentionally, but we try to fix it as quick as we can. Thank you.
Would you take just a second and share with the folks what your council did in the budget this year as it related to paving?
So we did increase the paving. Typically, we put LMIG plus another 100,000. We try to double LMIG. LMIG is typically 120 to 140, depending on what the state's formula. They did increase it a little bit this year, but we try to double it. But this year, the council and mayor really wanted me to address more paving, so we put in 500,000 to pave on top of LMIG. So hopefully, instead of 1 mile, we can get 3 miles. Our goal is to try to get all the streets paved within 10 to 20 years versus what we have been doing. Also, I didn't tell the council, but Cletus back there in Brandon, county was paving Hodges Street, which is off of Tom Brewer. There's a little section that belongs to Loganville. Well, the county typically stops at the county or their limits, but Cletus and Brandon and county got together, and for $13,000, we paved it all the way to the end of the road, which makes sense. So I hate when people stop mid-road, so we did pave that little section, so complete that road project.
For $13,000, that's a gift.
$13,000, money does not go far when it comes to paving.
No, it does not.
And it goes even less with sidewalks.
Hey, Bill, anything else?
No, sir, that's all.
Okay. Now we'll move to Public Works Facilities Committee, Melanie Long.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see, this past month, our stormwater department, they picked up 655 pounds of garbage around the city. And our Public Works, the chipping truck came around, they made 596 stops and picked up 38.25 tons. And I got a message today from Mockingbird Hill that I'd like to share. It says their entire neighborhood would very much appreciates the outstanding work done by the guys who pick up the tree limbs. This particular neighbor watched them not only proficiently pick up her limbs, one worker even swept the loose leaves up on the street. That's going above and beyond. It didn't go unnoticed or unappreciated, and that is one of the reasons why we looked at these increases in their salaries. We want to keep these guys. They do a great job, and they're much appreciated. They may not hear that enough, but I did get that message, and I wanted to make sure that I shared that with them. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Very good, Melanie. We'll move to Economic Development Committee now. Brandon Whitfield.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no actual items, but I do need to mention that July 21st, Departure will be coming back in town, and it's going to be a lot of fun, so you don't want to miss it. And also, we are taking applications for vendors for Autumn Fest already. So if you know any vendors, anyone who wants to be a part of it, please let Christy and the city know, and we can get you hooked up. But that's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. You going to mention the call meeting?
Oh, yeah, sorry. We do have, on the 20th of this month, we have Sizemore Group coming back here with the Main Street plan. Please come here, see what they have to say. Let's keep working forward. It'll be a hard stop. It's starting at 6:30. It's either, I thought it was 6. It might be 6:30.
Yeah.
I believe it was 6.
I think it's 6:30.
It's 6:30. So 6:30 to 8:30 with a hard stop, because we have Deanna Murphy coming back from Sizemore to go over the plan with us. So we can ask the expert themselves, in other words. But that will be a hard stop at 8:30. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Go to City Manager's report. Danny Roberts.
Just as we discussed Monday, I have 2 vacancies for the Loganville Development Authority. I believe you stated Monday night y'all would like to open it up and then set the interview process for the panel on the September work session, and then you would all vote on the September council meeting. Is that still the wishes of the council?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll open up the application Monday. I'll just need to get from y'all if you want the same questions that we've asked in the past, or if you want to come up with some different ones, let me know. But we'll open up the application. And Paul has already reviewed it, the residence form and the application. So he's gave his blessing, and we'll open it up Monday online, and people can go there and apply. And those forms can be, if they come, they can mail them to the city of Loganville, or they can give them to the Christie Ass HR. Or if they give them to y'all, just please give them to Christie. She's the one that compiles the list. Thank
Very
you.
good.
That's all I have.
Okay, sir. Move to City Attorney's updates. Paul Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mayor. You've got before you the donation bin ordinance that we talked about a good bit on Monday evening. We made some edits based upon your inquiries and suggestions. This is an ordinance that we feel like addresses the concerns that you have about addressing sort of unsightly and potentially unsafe use of these donation bins. The sort of registration period out of the box has been shortened to 120 days, and then we limited the total number of units on any single property to 3 donation bins. 1 acre or less can only have one, and anything over that can go up to a maximum of 3. And that's where you are. It's a registration process. It puts the property owners on the hook as well as the operators of the donation bins themselves. These are for unmanned donation bins only. It only addresses that type of use. And if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to entertain them. Otherwise, this thing is ready for your guys' blessing by a motion and adoption of the ordinance.
Okay, so those,
We're going to call this the J-Box plan.
What?
The J-Box plan.
What?
J.
Oh, yeah.
Box plan.
Sorry. Everybody's staring at me, freaking me out. So, the donation boxes were getting a little out of hand behind GameStop and Lowe's. So, this is a good fix. So we don't have any more. So we have mattresses and TVs and washing machines out there. All right. It's my motion. Yeah, let's make a motion. I need a second.
okay, we have a motion, we have a second, I think.
All right.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
And did.
Okay. It is adopted. Thank you for those couple of changes, Paul.
Absolutely. Next is me. And there were some requests for changes, and I got that letter back out to Danny, adding those changes in that I think Ms. Ann had requested of, clarifying what our fee is if it has to go hourly, which is our standard currently rate of $2.20 an hour, and then also clarifying that we wouldn't be asking for any raises mid-year, that we would only do a request for an increase in the flat fee during y'all's budget cycle process for the next upcoming year. So once you're locked into the year, you know what you're going to get, basically. So with that, if you want to keep me around, then a motion to do that would be appreciated. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, I think we got most of the questions answered Monday night. Do we have a motion?
I make the motion that we engage Paul Rosenthal. What else does it need to say? That it?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Don't know how we could live without that smile of his. All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Yeah, sorry, Danny.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Adopted.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Is that it, sir?
Yes, that's all that I have. I know that we have been talking about several different ordinances. We've seen some emails back and forth, and so we're going to get some drafts up to you. I do think, just kind of highlight now that you've locked me in here, that I may start, I'm not going to upset any apple carts, but I may start changing some of the flow processes that we do to give y'all a little bit more time, and more importantly, to give staff a little bit more time to marinate over some of the things y'all want. So just work with me. If you want us to change anything, let us know. But what we'll probably start doing is when you say, hey, we want this ordinance, hey, we want this ordinance, we'll work on getting drafts available and get them out for y'all to know that they're coming down the pipeline, so that the next cycle you'll see them, and we'll have more time to go through any tweaks or changes that you want. So there'll be a little bit of process adjustment over the next, say, year, but we're going to do it for the purpose of giving it more time for it to be out there, so there is more transparency, but also giving it more time for people to marinate on it, both internally and externally, because unfortunately, doing this 22 years, the law of unintended consequences shows up all the time in these rule changes.
Yes, it does.
And so we'll be changing things a little bit, but I'm not going to just, rip everything up and start over. But I did want to give you a heads up on that. So next month, you'll probably see some draft ordinances from us that we'll give to you and let you marinate on them to be able to look for let's see, what are we in? So we'll have some draft ordinances for y'all next month for you to look to adopt in September. And that way you've got really a full 60-day process to think about them. So when you tell me you want them, I'll get them to you, but we'll get them over time so that you got a little more time to marinate on them and make sure we don't want to tweak them or change them a little bit.
I noticed how the real Paul's coming out now that we actually hired him.
I was thinking you'd get that done in 30 days. Maybe not.
No, we'll always get it done as quickly as you want us to, but just to help everybody, particularly staff, and to give you all opportunity to read it and say, wait a minute, we might want to tweak this a little bit. I think it'll be more effective for everybody.
I think we all want it right. Okay, with that said, anything else?
No, I have nothing else, Mayor.
Okay. With that said, we'll bring the presentation of the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange to Israel. Chief Dick Lowry.
Put the 5-minute clock.
I thought my time changed when I went to the end. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they got the 2-hour version. I promise it's shorter than that. Right. Oh, Mayor and Council, you're aware I was selected to take part in the 2023 Gili delegation to the State of Israel. This was the 30th anniversary delegation. The program has actually been in place since 1992, but they lost a year on the delegation because of COVID when everything shut down. So not only and this is done through the Andrew Young School as part of Georgia State University. To date, they have done exchanges with 31 different countries, which includes us sending delegations to other countries to observe and learn from them, and they come here as well, and I have expressed my interest in the next group that comes from Israel coming out to Loganville, so we'll see if that plays out. As part of this delegation, it was the director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Lieutenant Colonel Hitchens, who is the second in command at Georgia State Patrol. The sheriff of Walker County went, 4 police chiefs, 1 representative from the U.S. Department of Justice, and we had only 1 non-Georgia law enforcement officer who was from Tennessee, who's the deputy director of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, went with us. And I don't know how well you can see the yellow lines, but if you can see them, shows you more or less our travels, which, as you can see, covered pretty much the entire state of Israel. We flew in, of course, to Tel Aviv and then went up to Haifa, spent almost a week in Haifa, then down to Jerusalem, and then down in the very bottom of Israel, right there at the Gulf, which is actually the Red Sea, in Eilat, and then back up to Tel Aviv. And you have to keep in mind in this travel, Israel is really not a very large country. You can drive from east to west in just under 3 hours and go from the border with Jordan all the way to the Mediterranean. So we did a lot of riding on a bus, which I hadn't done in quite a long time, and it's not as much fun as it might sound like. But inside the Israel Police Department, contrary to anything that we have here, the Israel Police Department is a national police force, and it is split basically into 2 divisions. The basic police, which they all refer to as the blue police because that's the color of their uniforms, who do the same kind of things that we do here in America. They answer domestic calls, they take theft reports, they do all those same types of things. And then you have the border guard, who, I guess a nice way of putting it, are a little more serious folks. They have a very, very difficult job because in securing the border of Israel, and we have all seen here in America that the way that we do it, we struggle to keep Guatemalan children out. They're not trying to keep children out. They're trying to keep out Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists. So their way of securing their border is quite a bit different than what we experience here in America. But I am here to tell you that you can, in fact, secure a border if you have the political will to do so. There are a lot of specialized units. For example, the district police stations, they don't do any traffic enforcement. They don't work traffic accidents. They don't divert traffic. They don't close roads. They have their own specialized unit that works traffic for the entire country. And there are other specialized units such as bomb disposal and things like that. As most everybody know, Israel requires a 3-year mandatory service upon turning 18. And I didn't know this until we went, but they can actually choose to serve in either the Israel Defense Force, the police department, or the border guard. And they do that for 3 years. And then at the end of that, they can do what they want to. They have an incredible amount of people who go on and go to college or go into other, trades, but still volunteer their time to carry out a lot of the in-house things that have to be done to make such a large operation work. We spent some time at Israel Police Headquarters. We were scheduled to have dinner and a big roundtable discussion with the commissioner of the entire Israel Police. And to give you an idea, it's about a little under 40,000 police officers that he's in command of. And the border guard is roughly 18,000, and the rest are part of the Blue Police. But he was called away to meet with the Prime Minister, and then they announced the day after we got back that they were not extending his contract, so I think our dinner was probably more pleasant than his that night. We also visited the National Logistics Center that handles all the property and evidence for the entire country, which will have increased, but the day we were there was about 2.6 million pieces of property and evidence. And I can tell you that we're now, 3 years into revamping our property and evidence function at Loganville Police Department. We don't have anything like that, so it's a massive, massive undertaking. Spent some time with bomb disposal people, of which they have quite a few, the traffic police, which I mentioned, and also some district police stations. And the whole point of this exchange is to learn different methods of leadership and keeping these folks who are facing a significant, dangerous job motivated, and some of the challenges they face and how they overcome it. And one of the big focuses that they have here in Israel is community policing. And of course, we hear that all the time in America, and every police department in the country says we follow the community police model and all these kind of things, and they have taken it to a whole new level in Israel, and they actually have folks that are assigned as community police officers or CPOs who wear a uniform, they carry a gun, they do all those things, they have full police authority, but they, unless it's a critical emergency, they don't make arrests. Their job is to build relationships in their communities, and if you think about, not only is it ethnic issues and things like that, but certainly, as we all know, the divisions between the three major religions of the world, along with a whole lot of other ones that have representation in Israel. And they do a really, really incredible job in doing that. Because of their efforts, we were able to meet with and share some time with some of these community leaders that generally you wouldn't get to do. We were the first group who got to meet with the Sheikh of the Bedouin people. And when I say the Sheikh of the Bedouin people, I don't mean just in Israel, I mean for the whole world. And they took the time to meet with a bunch of street police from Georgia. So I think that shows how effective they've been in building these relationships. And like I said, everything they do all the same things we do, but with that constant undercurrent of terrorism. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. They are facing, as has already been brought up earlier tonight, recruitment and retention issues just like we are. Even though they have the mandatory service, in order to keep their staffing numbers where they need to be, a high percentage of those folks need to stay in service, either with the military or the police forces, and they're just not seeing that. It started about the same time frame in Israel as we started seeing it here, where we really started to struggle in law enforcement to recruit. The biggest difference there is we have the opportunity, if somebody, for example, is working at the Newton County Sheriff's Office and they think they would be happier working for us, we can hire them. They don't have any other police forces to hire from. It's just one. So that's a significant struggle for them that they're dealing with, just like we are. They have really leveraged technology through the use of cameras and monitoring equipment, different devices spread throughout the whole country, which they use as really a force multiplier. And some of their control centers that we were allowed to visit, they allowed us to take pictures in, the other two, they blacked their screens even for us. Their use of technology is impressive and very significant for the safety of the country. Somewhat different than here, there is, in America, we have a provision, the Posse Comitatus provision, that prevents the United States military, with the exception of National Guard, who are under the control of the state governors, from operating within our borders. They don't have that same provision. So there are a number of times where the military and the police are working together, and particularly on the border guard side, some of their specialized units can actually just fold into the Army. And one of the units I'm going to tell you about in just a few minutes, that happened in the last Lebanese war in 2006, and their whole job was to run covert operations into Lebanon, and they're police officers. So they're a little bit different breed of people. Everybody in law enforcement uses role play, but one significant difference that they do is they don't, and I'll give you an example. For example, if we're doing force-on-force role play training, then say 4 guys that work for us go through, and now they rotate and they're the role players playing the bad guys, so to speak. They approach that from a law enforcement officer's perspective, which can skew your scenario. They hire professional actors and pay them a nice salary, and that's their job, they come to their police academies, and there's about 1,500 of them that work at the main police academy. And that facility where they do that it's no different than if we went into anybody's house that's here. There's food in the refrigerator, there's coffee on the coffee pot, there's cleaning products out on the tables, all those things. It's as realistic as you can possibly make it. This is one of their command and control centers. This is actually the single control center that all what we would consider 911 calls come into for the entire country. One thing that is significantly different there, they do not have a central number like we do for 911. If you want the police, you dial 100. If you need the fire department, you dial 101. If you need an ambulance, you dial 102, so on and so on, all the way down into public works. But if you dial 100, get there, they're not going to say, this is not the fire department. They'll put you where you need to go. It would seem to be confusing to me, but it works for them. And one significant difference in the way that they dispatch calls, if you call the Walton County 911 Center right now, you're going to talk to an operator who is obviously trained in taking emergency calls, and then they're going to get on the radio and dispatch it to one of our officers or more, however many are needed. That's not the way it works there. They take the initial information and it's transferred over to an actual police officer who talks to them, and that police officer dispatches the call. And one thing that they do as a regular practice, they have, it's very similar to what we have in our patrol cars, a tablet that has software and all that. The call goes to that, and in many, many cases, they will actually call and talk to whoever the complainant is on their way to the call. Because of the extensive camera system, these officers who are dispatching are also pulling up and looking. So if somebody runs away, they can tell them what they're wearing, which way they're going, all those kind of things. And it does increase their officer safety. And why I'm telling you that, it seems incredible to me because my whole career we've done it here in America. They have what I call throw-over vests, but their blue police officers do not wear vests under the uniform shirts like we do here. The main threat they face, physical threat, is not from guns, it's actually from knives. So those vests that our guys wear, they don't offer very much protection from that. But it is done a little different. This guy here was one of the really stood out to me. He is a bomb tech in the city of Haifa district. And he demonstrated this robot, and they operate much the same as the robots operate here. And I asked him after he finished his little presentation, I said, do you do everything with this robot now? And he said, no, if it's a building and it's evacuated or there's no people, then yes, I use a robot. But if there are women, if there are children, it's a daycare, it's a school, then I cut wires. I said, you cut wires? And he said, yes, sir. I said, how long have you been doing this? He said, 22 years. I said, how many times have you cut wires in 22 years? And he said, sir, in Israel, we don't count. So to give an example, let's say you got a bomb tech from the Atlanta Police Department, who, by the way, they go there to train with these guys. Everybody does, worldwide. A live device in a 30-year career, maybe 5 or 6 in a 30-year career. These guys are doing that a day, every day of the year. And it's just, it doesn't scare them. They don't see it as extraordinary like obviously I do. It's their life. It's what they do. And it's just a group. One thing that was impressive to me, everywhere we went, every police station, every government building that we were visiting on a scheduled visit, they were flying our flag along with theirs. And if y'all didn't know this, Israel is the only other country on earth that has a 9/11 memorial other than America. And it was built from rubble from the World Trade Center as well. This was in Sirdat, which is the southwest of the country, and in the background that you see there, those hills are part of the Gaza Strip. And in Sirdat, they receive more rocket fire in that district than the entire rest of Israel combined every year. The Sergeant Major, which is the guy in the light blue shirt, who's not really as friendly a guy as he looks in these pictures, quite honestly. His job, they call him the discipline sergeant, so you can kind of imagine what that consists of. But on a good month, they have 300 rockets that come in. On a bad month, it's 1,500. Every school, every playground, every home, every business, every building has a bomb shelter. Every single one. They are so close that, and the warning systems are pretty advanced and significant, but because of the distance that's involved here, they get 12 to 15 seconds of warning before the rockets land. That's not much time to do anything. They talk to us about having their own children be in bomb shelters, but they've got a job to do. And, you know, sometimes 15, 16 hours in one of these shelters. Where we're at right here is an observation post that's up on high on the hill, and where you can look and you're looking at, it's run, that area is controlled by Hamas, and it made them really nervous. In fact, you can see the one guy on the picture on the left looking behind us. They really didn't like us being up there. We went on to talk to this guy who is an EOD technician, explosive ordnance disposal technician, but his job is not doing small bombs, pipe bombs, things like that. What he's taking apart and disposing of are these rockets that come in, and the difference between a rocket and a missile, and everything that comes in there is a rocket. Rockets aren't guided. They're not targeted specific. They land where they land. And in my mind, what I would visualize is the military-style launch tubes and all that. That's not really what they do. These rockets that you see, all of that's right there is just a very small part of what they do. These are homemade in somebody's shop. These are built in somebody's garage, and to get the elevation, they just lay it on a hillside and then ignite it, and it goes where it goes. This particular one, these pieces, it was shot down by the Iron Dome, and it actually separates. The intention is for it to separate the warhead. So the Iron Dome system is extensive, but as good as it is only 91% effective for incoming rockets, which when you're talking about 1,500 rockets in a day, 9% is still a pretty significant number. Talked with the traffic police. I told you about that earlier. Their cars, I never saw an Israeli police car that had a divider, what we call a cage. They put people behind them, but they don't have a divider. They're outfitted very much like ours. Much of the emergency equipment, the laser speed detection devices they use are exactly what we have at the Loganville Police Department. A lot of that technology is the same. And this is a control center where they monitor all road traffic in the entire country of Israel. That picture there is about this much of this entire room that's covered with things like that, and their camera system is extensive, and they can reroute traffic and do a lot of things. And one of the advantages with the National Police Force is you don't have to call Snellville, you don't have to call Walton County, you don't have to call these other to all work together. It's all together from the beginning, which works very well. One thing that's different, and I believe that you're going to see this in some of the larger departments in America coming online, their property and evidence function is managed by a private company. The same company, which is an Israel-based company, Logisticare, has signed an exploratory contract with Miami, and they'll be, hopefully, I think they're planning, hopefully, to be online in 2024. And the way that it works simply is this: if I'm a police officer in a district station, I take in a piece of evidence, I enter it into the system. As I submit my report, it sends a message to these couriers that work for these people, which of course go through an extensive background check, and they drive and pick it up right now. If I need it for court, I do a submission, and they do it. Not only do they cover their property and evidence, all their logistical supplies, everything from uniform, shoes to hats to firearms, ammunition, all of that also runs out of here. And all of the officers have an app on their phone, so where now our system, if one of our officers needs new uniform shirts, we have a form, they fill it out, the supervisor approves it, and then Greg or I sign off on it, they go down to the uniform store and pick it up or order it. There they do it on the app, and they deliver it to the station before they finish their shift. I would love to have something like that, but I don't think we can quite justify that in the city level. Give you an idea of these shelves, this is just some of it, and keeping in mind, we've all seen these kind of shelves, and you can't tell in this picture, these are 18 tiers high, and there was 170 of them. It's a very extensive network. This one we met with the deputy commissioner, who is a really interesting guy. He spent almost his entire career both in the Army and in the police department doing hostage rescue type missions. Very interesting guy, and most likely he will be the next full commissioner. As I said from the beginning, I really enjoyed the time, honestly, with the Border Guard. They were my kind of people. We visited up in the northernmost city in the state of Israel with a unit that's called Yagal, which they just refer to as the unit. We were able to go up into the Golan Heights, a couple of different areas of it, visited inside Jerusalem, the unit that guards the old city, their training academy, and then down in the southern district around the Gaza Strip. Their mission is quite a bit different. They do most all of the counterterrorism, explosive ordnance disposal, hostage rescue, covert operations, all of that type thing. If you can imagine it, basically, the best way I know to put it to you, it's a SWAT team, but there's 18,000 of them. Very high-speed folks. They don't even refer to each other because their mission is so different. They don't refer to each other or their subordinates as my officers, my people, my guys. Anytime they're referring to them, these are my warriors or my fighters, which in America, for police officers, that really wouldn't work very well here, but that's really what they are when you boil it right down to it. They guard the borders with Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. Saudi Arabia does not share a land border with Israel, but there is a small, not very large water border as part of the Red Sea, which they also control and also access into and out of the Arab sector in the Old City. Their training, as you can imagine, is very intense. A lot of these people, that even though we're there meeting with them, and of course they know who we are and all that kind of thing, there were a number of them that never even took the mask that they were wearing off to let us see their faces. Some did, but as you'll see in the next few pictures, because this is going to be on YouTube, I've blanked out the faces of some of the people who really don't need to be on YouTube. Their focus with technology is really more with drones, and they, interestingly enough, the drone that we have that we use with Loganville Police Department, it's what is it, Greg, that big? It's not very big. It works very well. It's very capable, but it's not very big. They use that exact same model, but they also have some that are, the body of it is as big as this podium, that are tethered with a very small wire and can stay in the air for 8-10 hours at a time, where ours is roughly 30 minutes of flight time before you have to change a battery. These are guys from the unit. The guy on the left, in the left picture, and the officer on the left, I've been privileged in my life to spend time with military special operations folks and the Marine Corps, and I did SWAT for 12 years of my life and trained with LAPD and all kinds of folks. And I'm here to tell you that that man on the left right there is one of the top 10 hardest people walking the face of planet Earth. For 28 years, he has been in the northernmost city of Israel, in Kiryat Shimona, fighting Hezbollah for 28 years. He has a bounty on his head. His family is moved by the Border Guard every 2 to 3 weeks. He sees them very sparingly, and his commanding officer, who's standing next to him, you know, I ask, why does he still do this? It's who he is. And that's the level of dedication that you see within a lot of these Border Guard units, because it's not theoretical to them. It's not if this happens, it's when this happens, and when this happens literally is every single day. They don't have much downtime at all. This is up at what you see behind that fence is part of the Golan Heights. If you look there kind of the center, you see a white building. Everything at that white building and behind it is Lebanon. I was surprised that they let us go up there, quite honestly. And as you look, there's signs everywhere that say danger mines, and yes, they are live minefields. They're not planted by the Israelis, but as you know, historically, when they have fought wars with some of their neighbors, Israel has generally kept whatever territory they gained. So most of these minefields are Lebanese and Syrian. They graze cows in them, and every once in a while, a cow will dispose of a mine for them. The week after, what was it? The week after I got back, it was on. It actually was on CNN and several others, but this particular minefield right here, they detonated, and they're going to build, I guess, places for people to live in an old minefield. I hope they check it close. But the guy that I was telling you about, one of the members of our delegation, made the comment that it's really beautiful up here. I'm surprised people don't want to go hiking. And he was standing there with his arms crossed and looked there and said, hiking, no, 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 no. And scans the mountain and says, here is only Hezbollah and us. And they literally are what stands between Hezbollah and the state of Israel, that unit. Very impressive people. This, again, the Golan Heights, and if you look, basically the center of that picture to the left of it is Syria, and everything on the right is Jordan. The mountain that you see that's white tinged right there, a few years ago it was about 80 feet taller, but ISIS occupied that area, and they asked them very nicely in their best Sunday school voice to leave. They chose not to, so they made the mountain smaller than it was with a whole lot of bombs, and they left. You can't really tell it from this view, but there's a border fence down there that we're so high up it looks like a normal chain link fence, but it's about 40 feet tall that secures the border there. This again in the Golan Heights, additional minefields. The picture on the left there, the body of water that you see in the background is the Sea of Galilee. It was really incredible being able, and we were able to go over the couple of weeks, 4 or 5 different parts and places around the Sea of Galilee, but you can see how close there are active minefields still to the Sea of Galilee. And they had the United Nations observation post, and I asked our guide down there in the bottom, I said, do you guys work much with the UN? He just looked at me like it was a really, really stupid question and said no. So they don't do much with them. We're at the Border Guard Academy, and I'm not going to put her picture up here, but there was a young lady there that we watched a video of her fighting for her life in an alley in the old city of Jerusalem, where she was stabbed repeatedly in the face, and the head, and the neck, and she killed her attacker. Beautiful, looks like a college kid. And on the break, we were standing on that porch right there, and I said, how old are you? She said, I'm 19. And she's in training to be one of the officers, not an officer, but a commander in the border guards. Well, what you've been through, why would you possibly want to do this at 19 years old? She said, I choose to be a fighter for my country. And that's the kind of people that they build. Very impressive young lady. I'll tell you this, and let me say up front for anybody, this is not what we do in America. But I asked the guy whose face is blurred that you can see has got the thing. They were demonstrating some of the weapons that they use, and there was a scoped .22 rifle on the table. And just out of curiosity, what would you use that for? And we have used them in SWAT. I've shot out street lights and things like that with a suppressed .22. And he said, well, if we have big violent protests and we can identify the leaders, we go up high and we use that to mark them. I said, what do you mean to mark them? He said, yeah, we shoot them in the knee. That's not a use of deadly force for you guys, because it certainly is here. He said, to shoot a man in the knee? Certainly not. Okay, so basically what happens then, the guys that are on the perimeter, if they see a fellow limping, with a red shirt on and a bullet hole in his knee, they know that's the one they're looking for. So there are some things that don't quite match up with American law enforcement practices. And again, this is just pictures of some of the drones that they use. And they use a lot of all-terrain vehicles, four-wheelers, things like that. The big difference is you generally don't see four-wheelers being used by the Department of Natural Resources or the U.S. Border Patrol with munitions launchers mounted on the front of them, but that's part of the standard equipment there. They wouldn't let us drive it or shoot it, we ask. This was in the base inn just outside the old city of Jerusalem. These are their patrol cars. That's what they patrol in. And they look really beat up, and they are. And I don't know how well you can see it, but all these places with missing paint and dings and things like that are not from gravel flying up off the roadway. Those are from bullet strikes. Those are all bullet strikes. It is one of the most dangerous places to be a police officer on planet Earth. And again, as I said, you can secure a border, and that's what a real border wall looks like. And I snuck a picture of some Palestinians coming through the gate, but y'all don't tell nobody. I put this up just a dichotomy. The guy on the left is the commanding officer of the Airlock base, which controls the passage between East and West Jerusalem. The day we were there, he had been up 36 hours on some significant security issues that they were dealing with, and the entire time he was making his presentation to us, every 3 or 4 minutes, somebody is coming and whispering in his ear, and he's okay, and say something in Hebrew, and then they go off, and a few minutes later they come back. But he still made time to deal with us. They wear their rifles even inside the buildings in their offices. They never leave without their rifles. The flip side of that is this young lady on the right is 18 years old, and she is charged with working the gate between East and West Jerusalem. That is an incredible amount of responsibility for what, a lot of us have children and grandchildren that are close to that age, and I don't mean it to sound ugly, but I would shudder to think of some of those in my family of that age being charged with that much responsibility. We also were able to visit the Israel Supreme Court. We sat in on a hearing that they told us was a detention hearing for a Hezbollah terrorism suspect. The whole thing was in Hebrew, so they could have been talking about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but that's what they told us it was. We went and visited their parliament, the Special Unit for Arab Relations, the Holocaust Museum, and if you've ever had the opportunity to visit the Holocaust Museum that's in Washington, D.C., the one in D.C. is very, very well done, very emotional, very inspiring. But the one that is in Israel is at a whole different level. Our tour guide was actually an American immigrant to Israel. She was born and grew up in New Jersey and immigrated to Israel in her mid-20s along with her husband and their children. Her two oldest sons now serve in the Israel Defense Force. And both of her grandparents on both sides, all 4 of them were survivors of the camps. And on her father's side, she told us that they had 11 children, and people would ask her grandfather her whole life, why in the world would you want to keep up with 11 children? And he was always wink and say, that's my revenge on Hitler. And so I asked her, I said, well, how many children do you have? And she kind of laughed and said, well, I have 7. I said, okay, well, I guess you're getting your revenge too. But it's incredible what they've done, and of course what they have there, and it is very moving. We went into one of the prisons there, one of their maximum security prisons, and after we went through the briefings and things with all the bigwigs, we went in and went into the actual prison itself. I can tell you, having worked in 2 different county jails in my career, A prison in Israel is way, way quieter than a prison or a jail in America. Very quiet. After we went into one of the cell blocks, the sergeant there, she gave us a briefing on her folks and then asked if we wanted to look in one of the cells, which of course I said yes. And several of us went over there, and it's a two-man cell. And the guy that was visible right there, it's L-shaped, so one of them was around the corner and really didn't want to interact with us. He asked me where we were from. I said, we're here from America, and as I'm looking, there's basically a kitchen counter with a microwave and a coffee maker and, color TV, and there's a bathroom with a door, which generally you don't have in jail. And I told him, I said, yeah, in America you wouldn't have all of this. He said, I know, I was there. I said, in jail? He said, yes, in California. I said, why? He said, the marshals, they catch me and they make me come back here. So the U.S. Marshals tracked him down and they extradited him back, but he liked his privileges in Israel better than he did the Los Angeles County Jail. You meet all kinds of people when you travel. The Holy and Historical sites we visited, and I'm not going to spend all that much time, as I know I'm running over the time that Danny told me. But we went up and spent some time at the Masada Fortress, and that was really an incredible place. And we went down to the Dead Sea, and yes, you will absolutely float in the Dead Sea. You can't help it. I don't care what anybody tell you. You're going to float. You put rocks and all kinds of stuff in your pocket, you're still going to float. They told us that it had healing properties. So I floated around in it about 15 minutes. It didn't do anything to heal up my elbow, so I don't know, maybe I didn't stay in long enough. We went down to the Yardine baptismal site on the Jordan River, where Jewish tradition says that this particular bend in the river is where John the Baptist was baptized in Jesus. And we had the opportunity to do that, and I think 12 of the 20 in our group chose to do that. All of us that did had been baptized at some other point in our life. So the first time I was ever baptized was over across the street. Reverend, what was Steve's last name? Not Scoggins. Yes. All right, well, I did it again in Israel, and I had to tell several people when I got back that no, contrary to popular belief, the water did not boil when they dipped me in there. But it's really an incredible experience to be able to do that. We went to the Mount Carmel, where's the cave of the prophet Elijah, several places again on the Sea of Galilee, and one that was really moving for me. We were standing there at the shoreline, and I asked the guide that we had that day, the police officer, I said, what are those white buildings directly across over there? And he said, that's Capernaum. I said, like the Capernaum from the Bible? And he said, yes. I said, like the Capernaum where Jesus started his ministry? He said, yes. I said, like the Capernaum where he drew his disciples? He said, yes. I said, the fishing village is still a fishing village, and it is. And some of the other folks came up and heard part of the conversation, and were asking me, I said, y'all, you got to think about this. If you believe what's in the Bible, then where we're standing and looking at this section of the Sea of Galilee, this is where Jesus walked on water. And it's really an incredible experience, very emotional experience. We went all through the old city of Jerusalem, and because they sent us with 4 border guards, we went through areas of the Muslim quarter where if you go with a church group or tour group, you're not going to go, I promise you, but we did. And I talked them into, there was a particular thing that I wanted to get at the Western Wall, and they weren't real happy about it, but and I'm all through customs now, so I put some stuff in a Ziploc bag and stuck it back in my pocket and brought it back with me from there. So it's a beautiful country. This was the sunset on the last day we were there in Tel Aviv, and I don't know who the guy was out there on the sailboat, but he timed it just right to be right there in the corner of the picture. I was really happy for that. And it's easy to forget what they face in Israel and the threats. And as you go different places in the country, this is up in the Negev Desert. And I don't know if anybody here has ever had the opportunity to go to Israel and go through the Negev Desert, but I promise you, if you do, it's way easier to understand how Moses stayed lost there for 40 years, I promise. But you look and it looks, initially it's just a hillside in the background, but then when you get up closer, you see they're bunkers that are still there in every part of the country you go, because they have to be prepared to defend it at any time. And if you think airport security in Atlanta is rough, this is on the left before you ever get in the airport. There's a guy going to get in your car or make you get out of the car, on the bus, whatever it's going to be, and look for guns and explosives. And they really, we tried to cut up with them. I'll be honest with you, they didn't have much of a sense of humor about it, quite honestly. And then here on the right, that's actually part of the Iron Dome rocket defense system. And I took that picture out the bus window. That's on the side of the road. You would never in a million years see something that critical to America's defense 25 yards off a roadway, unguarded. But that's what they're faced with. And I think what was my count, Danny? I didn't look. Sorry. Okay, sorry. But can I answer any questions for anybody? A lot of things that I learned with the community policing and they're doing, I said the night that I was sworn in that I was committed in our community to having the difficult conversations that are required to affect real change. And they're certainly doing that in Israel, and it was certainly proof that that's the only way we're going to affect real change, is to have difficult and uncomfortable conversations. So we're going to continue to do that in Loganville. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. And with that 4-hour presentation, we'll move right along. Do we have a motion to adjourn? We have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? Is there anybody in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for being here.